to allow it to turn into a debate. We're here to have civil discourse, so I'm just putting that out there as a reminder, just in case. And with that, I think we're going to get started. So, question 1 is eliminating the gas tax indexing. And presenting the yes position is Greg Niffinger. Please, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Greg is the former mayor of West Springfield, and I'm going to start with you, and Jim's going to tell you when you have a minute, 30 seconds, and then stop.
So we have 4 minutes, is that
4
right?
4 minutes.
And the microphone isn't working?
The microphone does work, and we are broadcasting live on Easthampton Community Access Television. It'll be available later on their website.
Wonderful, but it's not amplified, right? People don't hear it over the speakers. Just want to make sure. I have a cold, so I'll use my 4 minutes and I don't get paid sick time because I'm a self-employed person also, right? Like 80% of the country is, right? Why do I think you should vote yes to repeal the gas tax? Why do I believe that? Because basically, the arguments we're hearing is that everything's going to fall apart. I was so disappointed with AAA that they were endorsing this, and I'm going to cancel my AAA membership because of that. Basically, you've heard it, the roads are going to crumble, the bridges are going to crumble. You've seen those television ads, right? That is a farce. It's ridiculous. No one says you can't raise the gas tax. That's your job as a legislature, is that you're supposed to vote and have debate on taxes, especially. What happened to no taxation without representation? I mean, we fought a revolutionary war. We split with England because of that. England had a rebellion in 1896 because of no taxation without representation. It was put in the English Bill of Rights, which we later adopted for the American Bill of Rights. We want representatives to represent us. Right now, they passed a law that the tax is tied to inflation, so they don't have to vote on it anymore. Why don't they want to vote on that anymore? The reason is they're scared, because when you raise taxes, people aren't going to vote for you, right? Well, you know what? Maybe you ought to look backwards and think, why are our roads and bridges, the average cost is 6 times the national average? Why is administration 10 times the national average? Why? Because they don't have the guts to go in there and fix a problem. That's what we want them to do. Do your jobs as legislatures. Don't put it off on some automatic thing. Next thing you know, your property tax is going to be automatic, tied to inflation. And your income tax is going to be tied to inflation and everything else. It's a bad idea. Why? Because if you think you need more money, then you propose it, you debate it, and people like you and I can go to Boston or talk to our local legislature and tell them why we're upset about what they're doing. And we can say to them, why does it cost so much money, 10 times the national average, to administer our roads? It's horrible, but yet they're doing nothing about it. It's happening all across the state in every municipality. We need to have people do things like the private sector does, to do it well, bring in efficiencies. They're wasting our money, and yet they're afraid to go in because it's not our money, it's their money. That's the way they look at it. They look like you've got a pool of cash, you just bought a new car or a new coat, you can afford to pay higher taxes. That's the way they really look at it. This is not the way it's supposed to be. The private sector is killing themselves trying to find better ways to provide services, and yet the government cannot do it. They ought to do it. The technology is there, the knowledge is there, but they don't have the will to do it. And that's all we're asking them to do is vote on it. We're not saying you can't vote. We're saying you ought to vote. It can't be automatic. The Democrats control our legislature 85% to 15. Most people are not aware of that. In order to get this law, for them to vote it back to the way it used to be, you're going to have to get in a ton of new legislatures to do that. Instead, we have a ballot initiative that allows us to vote on it, to repeal this. So I'm asking you to vote yes to repeal the automatic gas tax. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm just reminding folks that a yes vote would eliminate the requirement that the state's gas tax be adjusted annually based on the consumer price index. And I'm going to turn it over to, I know it says that Margie Riddle from the Northampton Area League of Women Voters was presenting, but we have also tonight Josh Ostrov who is the Outreach Director for Transportation for Massachusetts, among lots of other positions that he holds. But I want to give him this 4 minutes so he can tell us about those after. Josh, would you like to present the position on no?
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much to Easthampton Matters. I congratulate you on your civic organization and initiative. Thanks to the sponsors and to you who are attending and watching on television. I ask you to vote no on question 1 on November 4th as a matter of safety and responsibility. As you know from driving around, we have a transportation system that's in disrepair. We urgently need to replace roads and bridges, to invest in transit, to make sure that people can get around, get to school, get to work, live their lives safely, conveniently, affordably. The legislature has known for many years that we had an issue with transportation revenue in this state. Back in 2007, there was a report that identified the scale of the problem, and it's enormous. About $1 billion a year above what we were spending was needed just to bring our roads and bridges up to a state of good repair. So the legislature knew that we had a long-term problem, and they set about to undertake a long-term solution. The gas tax was increased by 3 cents, which was the first increase in 22 years. And over that 22 years, the gas tax had lost about 42% of its value. That is, the 21-cent gas tax from 1991 was only worth about 12 cents by 2013 when they passed the law. The reason for that is inflation. And that's what the indexing is intended to correct. The fact that as asphalt, concrete, steel, all the things that go into making, safe transportation, those costs escalate, but the tax did not. Now, it's true that other taxes don't automatically increase with inflation, but the revenue does. Income taxes, that revenue goes up naturally. Sales taxes, naturally. But the gas tax, because it's a flat rate, it tends not to increase unless we put in an adjuster for it. So the legislature actually did take a vote. They took many votes on this, and they will undoubtedly take many votes again because there will be legislation to repeal it or change it. Because the reality is we haven't fixed all of our transportation funding issues. Now, it is also true that we do spend more than the national average on maintenance. But a couple things you should know about the study that Mr. Neffinger cites is that first, it just looks at a slice of what we spend on transportation, maintenance. And when you have old infrastructure, and the average age of bridges in the state is 57 years old, they cost a lot more to maintain. Anyone with an old house or an old car could tell you that you have to put more money into upkeep. The other issue is that really is only, as I said, just a little part of the budget. So I think that we need to understand that it's up to us to help solve this problem. No one else is going to do it. The idea of, say, borrowing money, which has been proposed, that's kind of how we got into this mess to begin with. We're going to need to find a responsible way to raise revenue. A small annual increase in the gas tax is a reasonable way to do it. And here's what it means to you as a driver. If we apply the 2% consumer price index to a 24-cent gas tax, that will mean it'll go up half a cent in January. And if you use, say, 1,000 gallons of gas a year, your cost will be negligible, $5 a year. So it's not going to break anyone's wallet, but the benefit is enormous because cities, towns need that money to invest in their local roads and bridges. We need it to do major regional projects like the I-91 viaduct. This money has to come from somewhere. It's in our interest to do it, and we avoid a substantial cost of repairs by not, by having this prudent investment. Another report that was released just about a week ago talks about what it means to you as motorists to have bad roads and unsafe bridges. It actually is quite substantial. On average in the Springfield area, calling this the Springfield area, about $1,600 a year. And that is what people pay to fix their cars, the time people pay in congestion and delays, and the safety risks from bad roads and bridges. So I ask you to vote no on question 1, and the website for my committee is saferoadsbridges.com. Thanks again, look forward to your questions.
Great. So now we're going to open it up for 5 minutes of questions. If anyone has a question, if they'd like to come up so that you get recorded on ECAT, please do come on up and ask your question. No questions. Okay.
One at a time.
Don't fight.
Hi, I'm Jim Allencourt. I do have a question. How is it determined how much of that money stays in the eastern part of the state as opposed to how much comes to the western part of the state to repair our roads?
Sure. I'm so glad you asked that question. So I'm sorry, but I should not assume that I'm the one answering it.
Why don't you take 1 minute first, Josh, and then we'll let Greg have his answer after.
Great, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, thank you for the question. So two things I want to point out. There's something called the Chapter 90 program. I'm elected in Natick. I'm chair of our Board of Selectmen there. I know you have a different form of government here, but we and Easthampton and every other city and town receive money from gas tax revenue to fix our local roads and bridges, and that's based on road miles. So a larger geographically area would typically receive a little bit more than that. So that happens, and that's funded by the gas tax. Another thing that my organization, Transportation Massachusetts, put into the law in 2013 was sort of arcane, called the Project Selection Advisory Committee, and that committee is evaluating how we spend transportation dollars. It's got representatives from Western Mass, Eastern Mass, the Cape, throughout, to make sure that we get the most bang for the buck for limited dollars. So that is, you have your state government, the bureaucracy, as unwieldy as it may seem, they are working to make sure that there's fairness and equity. I hear from people all over the state in my various government roles that we have, everyone feels underserved.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
If you believe that, I've got some great land for you in Florida to sell for you, some great waterfront land. To think, former mayor of West Springfield, to think that the state is doing anything well, and that you should rest assured on anything being done well, and that the money's going to come out here west, or that the money's even going to be spent on roads and bridges, which the last gas tax raised wasn't. It's not going to happen. The thing is that there are no standards, there's no metrics, there's nothing to measure how things are done. They're just not. And what happens is that they want to have this automatic gas tax to get them off the hook. Basically, it shouldn't be automatic. They need more money. Of course we need to repair our roads and bridges. We're not saying not to. We're saying don't make it automatic tax. Vote on the tax and let us say in debates what we think about how they're running the state. That's all. And the money is not guaranteed anywhere. And please never rest assured that the government is doing anything, okay, is guaranteeing anything, because they're not. You don't know what's happening. And as former mayor, I can tell you, you really don't know what's happening for our government and where the money's being spent.
Thank you, Greg. Does anyone else have a question, or should we move on to the next question, number 2? Okay. Do you have a question, Mayor?
I just have a quick question. Isn't it true that the gas tax is the only money that's definitely earmarked for roads and bridges under Chapter 90?
And this time, if Greg gets a minute first, and then we'll let Josh have a minute. Thank you, Mayor.
Chapter 90. Chapter 90.
Chapter 90 is money that's dedicated for roads and bridges, but I'll let Greg, if he wants to cover that too.
First of all, they can always change how they want to do it. You can't, it's not in the Constitution that they can't. They can go and vote again and decide that money has to go somewhere else. And is the tax money the only money that's used for roads and bridges? Does the money come out of the general fund? Really what happens is all the money should come out of the general fund. They always talk about target taxes, and we find out what happened with the lottery. All that money was supposed to go to education, right? Now, like what, 10, 20% goes to education, right? We're always told that from the beginning. It's going to be earmarked for something, and then it gets changed later on, right? What happened to the Quinn bill? That was supposed to be benefits for the office, for police officers. That got changed also. You can change anything at any time. They will tell you, they'll guarantee you, they'll tell you, rest assured, it's not the reality.
Thank you.
So in 1974, the voters of the Commonwealth passed Article 78 of the state constitution, which guarantees that your gas taxes do pay for transportation, not just roads and bridges. It will pay for the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority. It'll help pay for the MBTA. It'll help pay for many other kinds of transportation, bike paths and sidewalks and everything else. But it absolutely is spent on transportation. Some people say it gets diverted from roads and bridges, and that's true. But you definitely don't want everyone who takes a bus to necessarily have to take a private vehicle. 1 out of 8 people in Massachusetts doesn't have a car, and a lot of seniors depend on regional transit. So you certainly want that. I'd say, unquestionably, the money that we pay in gas taxes is dedicated for transportation. Doesn't mean that every dime of it is going to be spent on this road in this town, but it absolutely is spent on transportation. I hope that answers the question that you asked. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Question 2, expanding the beverage container deposit law. So, a yes vote would expand the state's beverage container law to require deposits on containers for water bottles, Gatorade bottles, that kind of stuff, with some exceptions, increase associated handling fees, and make other changes to the law. And MassPerg was going to send a representative, and then we had a great change up, and instead we have the Reverend Ann Hallstein, whose name I apologize for butchering, who will speak instead on behalf of the yes position.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you to Easthampton Matters and to the town for providing space, and to all of you for coming out on this kind of nasty night. I'm a volunteer with the Yes on 2 campaign, which is the statewide coalition of over 120 environmental and civic groups that have come together to promote expansion of the bottle bill. And it includes groups like Mass Audubon, people at Arcadia are active in it, the League of Women Voters, and over 200 towns and cities which support the bill in the Commonwealth. So I'm just going to go over a few facts quickly, because I think probably most of you have heard, you've certainly heard a lot from the opposition, because they can fund advertising and the coalition can't. But I'd like to give a few facts and then try to put that in some larger perspective. You probably all know the original bottle bill was started in 1983, so it's over 30 years old now. That was on carbonated beverages in response to a big explosion of litter at the time, plastic container litter. Bottles that are worth a nickel don't get littered or trashed, just like actual nickels don't. We don't throw nickels away, and we don't throw nickel bottles away. In fact, 80% of the bottles that do have the deposit on them get recycled, while only 23% of non-deposit bottle makes it to recycling. This is from the Department of Environmental Protection. Now, the DEP also tells us that 1.5 billion bottles that are not covered by the deposit, plastic bottles used for water, sports drinks, iced tea, all these things that came along since the original bill, about 1/4 of that 1.5 billion are recycled a year, which leaves about 1.1 billion in trash. And just to help you imagine that, the amount of bottles without deposits that go into trash and landfills every year would fill Fenway Park all the way up and above the Green Monster. So that gives you an idea of the bulk we're talking about. The DEP does also estimate that over 1/2 of that Fenway Park full of bottles would be recycled with the deposit bill. Now, I'd like to just speak to some of the signs that you've probably seen around or in the advertising that says, "Stop forced deposits." I'd like to say, maybe use the word required instead of forced. These are things that our Commonwealth requires to create a better community. We require licenses for dogs that cost $10 or $15 a year. It's to protect us from rabies, and some of you may remember the children that were recently bitten in Amherst. The dog wasn't licensed, they didn't know the owner, and those children had to be given rabies shots. We require driver's licenses to keep us safe on the road. That's a $115 fee. There are many other fees, hunting and fishing. The point is, with the bottle bill, yes, you will be required to pay a deposit, but unlike all these other ones, you can get your deposit back. So it's really an incentive to try to get people to recycle. The cost is really much of the cost for the trash and litter is to towns and communities, and we pay for it as taxpayers. I would like to call on the residents of the Commonwealth to vote for our Commonwealth.
Thank you, Ann. And now I'd like to introduce Mike Messer, who is an Easthampton resident, a member of the city's Democratic City Committee, and also works at Big Y.
I do. My name is Mike Messer. I live in Easthampton. I've been here about 25 years. I'm very environmentally conscious. I would consider myself a pretty green person. I drive a Prius, plug-in. I drive it to work, plug it in, drive home, no gas. I burn a lot of wood. I use reusable shopping bags, and my family and I recycle best we can. We don't throw trash out the window, don't leave bottles in the woods. We're, environmentally sound. And the point of full disclosure, I do work for Big Y. I'm a store manager in the West Springfield store, which is an urban setting. We deal, it's a very busy place for recyclables. I'm not a spokesperson for Big Y or for the bottle industry, but I do have a lot of experience handling these recyclables. I think it's very fair to say that we're all in favor of more recycling, less refuge, and to take care of some of these problems. I think the question is how do we make it better? How do we make it easier? And what we really need is a comprehensive plan. Some states like Delaware have repealed the bottle bill altogether in favor of comprehensive plans for recycling and to eliminate litter. At first glance, expanding the bottle bill seems, oh yeah, that sounds good. But on closer inspection, there's better ways and more efficient ways to reduce the waste. So let's talk it through, right? Right now you've got your Juicy Juice bottle or your Ocean Spray cranberry drink. And when you're done with it, you throw it in your bin. And then once a week or every other week, you bring it out to the curb. And the trash haulers, is what they do. They haul it to the recycling center and they shred it, or they turn it into beads, and then it gets turned into sneakers or some such thing. That's how it goes right now. But what this proposal will do is to put fees on, 5-cent fees on all those containers, Ocean Spray, Juicy Juice, V8, iced tea jugs, and as well as water and sports drinks, which the single-serve water and sports drinks are the real problem, really. But we're going through all the juices, all the waters, all of that. Currently, most of those items are recycled at curbside, as I stated before. However, the state doesn't trust you to put it in the bin, so they want to charge you a nickel at the store. Now when you're at home, you have to store those in your garage, in your cellar, in your pantry, whatever you do. Put them in a bag, bring them down to the store, and deal with returning them to get your slip, and then turn that in to get your nickels back, right? So then what's the store do with them? We shred them. By the way, those big bottles don't fit in the machines. The machines are made for, so now we're talking about new machines or the old box method where somebody's back there sorting them into where they go. And then we shred them, we store them, and then we send them to the very same recycling factory. There's no value in it for retailers, and it's a lot of hassle for families. And we're paying for curbside recycling, so now we've got a dual system going on. It really doesn't make much sense. The whole idea of bringing dirty containers back to the supermarket doesn't make sense to me. In the 80s, there was a big problem with litter. It made some sense. But times have changed. When I drive around Easthampton, I see the recycling bins full on Tuesday. If I was in charge, I'd make the recycling bins as big as the trash bins, and you'd get more compliance automatically. But at the end of the day, this is really not about litter. This is about tax. It's about a new revenue stream that's already been beneficial to the state to the tune of $350 million of your money that you paid in deposit that was never returned. So I urge you vote no on expanding this bill. There's better ways to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone have questions from the audience? Want to come up and pose a question for either of our two speakers or for both of them? No? It's not a questioning crowd. Aha, there we go. We have a question.
Hi, my name is Marin Goldstein. I am the Outreach and Education Manager at the Center for Ecotechnology, and we are one of the organizations in both the Berkshires and the Pioneer Valley doing recycling education in the area. And we do a lot of recycling education in towns, let's say, particularly like Pittsfield. Pittsfield has a 16% recycling rate. We've been doing a recycling education program there for 7 years now, trying to help from kids up change that pattern. Unfortunately, it's not happening. The recycling rate is not increasing. So what that means is for the people who think, oh, we'll just recycle better, that's not always the answer, because unfortunately it's not happening across the board everywhere. And so my question is, if the critical issue is not necessarily litter, but landfill, how can we change the bottles going into the landfill so that they get put into the recycling? And what is their suggestion then for if recycling isn't the only answer that's going to happen there? Or what's going to force or push recycling forward then?
Did one of you want to take this first?
I think the key to recycling is to make it comprehensive, to make a plan where it's easy for people to do, not to be a hassle for people and penalized. They have to pay that money up front because the fact is they might not throw their bottle in the bin. I think, if you go to certain places, even over at UMass, when you go into a lobby or something, there's bins there for bottles, cans, papers, trash. It's pretty simple. If you go to a state park, it's there, right? The stuff just needs to be sorted. And it should be sorted by the individual or the public space where it occurs. It shouldn't have to be sent back to stores to be sorted. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It should be sorted on the spot and sent out to the appropriate place, the way I see it. I'm no expert on the new technology, but I know there is a lot of new technology, and there's things called single stream sorting, where things go down a belt and air hits up the bottles and they can sort that, and that's being used in some places. So I think the technology is evolving as well as the public perception of how to recycle better.
I don't know if this answers specifically directly, but I think very related. The fact is that because we have the deposit on the bottles we do now, 80% of those do get recycled. Without the deposit, it's only 23%. So I think we can say that the deposit is a motivator. Another factor in terms of education and educating all of us, I think we all pretty much assume that recycling, curbside recycling, is a given in Massachusetts. It's not, and I brought as just a little show and tell. It was interesting to me. Just today I had opened up the phone book to look up a zip code on the last page, found that's been replaced. There's a recycling guide that says communities with curbside recycling services go here. Communities without curbside recycling services can go to one of these towns. There are still towns not served by recycling, so we do have to look at how to increase education, but I think we also have more to do in terms of making recycling available, and the deposit has been proven to help that happen.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Marcia has a question.
Hi, I'm Marcia Morrison. Let's say we all vote yes, and we all put this into place, and we're now paying 5 cents more for certain kinds of containers, and then we're taking them back to get our 5 cents back. You just said, I believe, Mike, that the machines do not accommodate some of the cranberry juice, et cetera, that we're going to have 5 cents. Will you be required to make changes, and where is that money going to come from? I'm just curious.
Well, changes will have to be made. Either we need new machines, right, that are retrofitted or designed to take all these odd-shaped bottles, or, I don't know, some places still have, but in the old days there'd be these boxes with these big bags in them, and people would sort them, right, by a vendor or by brand, and then they get processed that way. But, that's going to the real issue with that is, this is more than 5 cents. That's the cost of doing business. So the money's going to come in higher prices for groceries in general, particularly on beverages. And that's not, I've read in the paper today, people think, well, it's a scare tactic. It's just a fact. It's just simple business. If your cost of goods go up, the cost of handling goes up, then the price of those products will go up. That's where it's going to happen. I mean, if you go up to Big E's and look where their machines are, right? Now they're going to have double, 3 times as much bottles to handle there. Where they would put that, I don't know. But they'd have to make some accommodation, a new station somewhere. Maybe something out in the parking lots would be built. But it's going to be an expensive proposition. It's more than just the nickel. We're talking about $60 million to get the thing off the ground. And the money is not going to be paid by, the money is going to be paid by the consumer, ultimately, I believe. Thank you.
Ann?
Yeah, I shop at Big E all the time, and I love Mike Superson, and I hate to think of anything like interfering or causing his business a problem. So I can resonate with the groceries position on this. I think what we have to do is look at that as a separate question in terms of, there are states such as Maine that have recycling centers that's just all they are. They're run, I think, by the state and paid for through the program. It doesn't go through grocery stores. Maybe that's something we ought to look at in our state, to take it out of grocery stores. But that does seem to me a different question than what we have now, which is trying to deal with the problems we're dealing with. But, I think it's not like all or nothing.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you want to come up, Nancy, or did you want to?
finished? Questions take that up on the...
I think, do we have one more question? We have one more question. Thanks.
Hi. So, Mr. Messer, you mentioned earlier, or you kind of concluded by referencing how this has become a revenue stream of sorts. And I've certainly witnessed the bottle redemption kind of serve as a revenue source for a lot of the families that I've worked with. So I've done a lot of outreach work with families who have very limited resources, and folks who actually have turned to that as a kind of survival mechanism. So I've seen how that's been an income stream for them, a small one, but very significant for them, given the limited finances that they're working with. So I guess I was just wondering, if where else this revenue stream has been seen, if you know who else is benefiting or not benefiting, but particularly benefiting from this revenue source.
Right. I think what I meant was the revenue stream was for the state, because they get to keep all those nickels. They do nothing, by the way. They just pass the law, and they don't handle anything, as you mentioned. But all those unclaimed nickels, which now they're talking about billions of bottles, you were telling me, that's billions of nickels, and whatever percent does not get redeemed, the state keeps. That's what I meant by revenue stream. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of, I think you're talking about homeless people and such, picking cans and returning for nickels. If that's the social program that we want to have in this state, that's a pretty sad state of affairs. I mean, when we're using bottle returns as to help with some of our social problems with poor people. The reality is, people go out and pick the cans and they turn them in. But I think that in Massachusetts, we can do a little bit better than that. I would hope, quite honestly. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Just like to say, this doesn't answer the people you're talking about, but when we talk about revenue stream to the state, part of this question is that money from the bottle bill, from the deposits, will no longer go into general revenue in the state, but will go into a specific fund for environmental projects. That had been part of the bill, the long ago bill, and it was overturned by the legislature to come their way. But this would be mandated that it would go to help with the environment. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks to both of you. Okay, so question 3, expanding prohibitions on gaming, which is, I find, one of the most confusing questions in this set of 4 ballot questions, because a yes vote means no casinos, and a no vote means yes casinos. Very confusing. Anyway, here today to talk on the yes position, which would repeal the legislation that allows casinos to be built in Massachusetts, is Margie Riddle from the Northampton Area League of Women Voters. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting all of us here this evening to talk about these, what I think are all confusing ballot questions myself. You may know that the League of Women Voters has been in existence since women got the vote in around 1920, and that the way we operate is by studying issues like this one, and then gathering all the information that we can, and finally coming to consensus around a position that we will then hold. And interestingly, the League in Massachusetts has held a position against casino gambling since 1982. And most recently, we've seen a real downturn in our economy in the country and actually around the world, which perhaps has made the idea of casino gambling much more appealing to people, and perhaps that's why Massachusetts recently sort of raced to approve casino gambling as an opportunity for jobs and revenue coming into the state. However, the League continues to feel that casino gambling is not the way to finance anything, and that there are all sorts of questionable outcomes about it. So I just want to say that a yes vote for question 3 would repeal the recent legislation that allows casinos to be built in Massachusetts, and it would mean that no casinos can be built in Massachusetts, and this even includes the ones that have already been approved. So it reverses previous legislation. Opposition to the established legalized casino gambling in Massachusetts has been put forth by the League because members oppose the legalization of casino gambling after having carefully weighed the stimulus to increased employment, supposedly, to tourism and tax revenue, supposedly, against the demands for social and municipal services, police protection, and the establishment of a state regulating body. And more recently, you may have read in the news that places which have established casino gambling have seen those negative outcomes. So that's why the League continues to hold this position. Massachusetts adopted, after long debate, legislation which allowed for 3 resort-style casinos, and we know one of them was going to be really nearby, and 1 slot parlor to be located in different parts of the state. At least 1 casino would go to a Native American tribe. That legislation, which was recent, came about after vigorous opposition in which the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts took part, opposing it, but it also had great support amongst those who thought of it as an economic boost. Massachusetts, as a result, adopted a very tight licensing process with rigorous standards for licensed applicants, and the requirement that the consent of the host community be obtained. So you may have noticed that lots of times the host communities are saying no. Several communities have voted against having casinos in their towns, and some have embraced the idea. In summary, I want to leave some time for questions for sure. A yes vote would prohibit casinos or any gambling establishment with slot machines and wagering on simulcast greyhound races. And that's the League's position. Please vote yes.
Thanks, Margie. And now I want to explain the next speaker. So members of Easthampton Matters did reach out to MGM, the City of Springfield Mayor's Office, the City of Springfield City Council, the Coalition to Protect Mass Jobs, and Senator Donald Hummison's office to ask for someone to come and represent the no position on question 3. And we tried, I shouldn't say we, because Connie tried for a very, very long time. We've spent a month trying to get someone to come speak on this position. We were not successful in getting someone to come speak. However, we do have from the Coalition to Protect Mass Jobs a written statement that Connie is going to read. This does not mean that Easthampton Matters has a stand on this issue at all. It does not mean that Connie does. So just so you're clear, what we're doing is reading the Coalition to Protect Mass Jobs position statement on the ballot question. Thanks,
So
Connie.
because I was unsuccessful, I'm the one.
Sorry.
So, casino developments can create 10,000 high-quality permanent jobs and 6,500 construction jobs. With so many people still looking for work, Massachusetts needs the 10,000 new jobs this law creates and the 6,500 construction jobs that go along with it. Already in Plainville, where residents overwhelmingly approved a new slots casino at the harness racing track, saving the 125 track jobs, hundreds of construction workers are already building the new facility. In Springfield, where unemployment is 9.1%, job and vendor showcases have been filled to capacity, and special training programs are already in place for the new resort casino approved by Springfield voters last year. Casino development can create real opportunities with jobs that offer solid wages and real benefits. The Massachusetts job market may seem bright in some fields like technology and finance, but for those without a college degree, unemployment is twice the state average, and much of our state is really struggling. Gaming businesses provide work for people with many backgrounds and interests, but are especially important for offering the kinds of jobs that allow people to take a step toward or into the middle class. The average salary in the retail sector is in the $26,000 range, and those jobs often don't include health care or other critical benefits. By contrast, the gaming industry offers an average compensation of around $45,000, including benefits, the kinds of benefits that give families real economic security, the opportunity to build for a long-term career path. At a time when many are struggling to find jobs that provide both stability and an opportunity for growth, the gaming industry can provide a gateway to both. A no vote can ensure communities that have already voted to host a casino can get the new jobs, business, and revenue they voted for. The voters of Springfield, Plainville, Revere, and Everett made their choices. They have voted in favor of hosting a gaming facility and the jobs and opportunities that come with it. In the cities that approved gaming, unemployment rates are higher than the rest of the state. In Springfield, the unemployment rate still hovers near 9%. There are real people lining up for those jobs right now in Springfield and Plainville where licenses have been granted. These jobs will help us keep the next generation of young people here in Massachusetts, not pulling up stakes and going to other regions of the country. Each of the winning license holders has made a commitment to hire local workers, buy from local vendors, and make broader investments in the community. Agreements are in place that will direct payments to communities in close proximity to the casino results totaling over $50 million, and this is in addition to the gaming tax revenue that is earmarked specifically to benefit communities statewide. Voters in these cities and towns already approve gaming by large margins. They should be able to decide what is best for their communities. Developing casinos means we can stop shipping our residents' hard-earned money and tax dollars out of the state to Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Maine. Casinos will generate more than $400 million annually in new revenues for Massachusetts state governments and cities and towns. And finally, casino development will open the door to thousands of new non-casino jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars in new business opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Connie. Folks have questions on any of those? You want to come on up? So we'll do 5 minutes for questions. And again, very challenging for my colleague Connie to answer questions, but I can tell you, I'm just going to say one quick thing. If you are interested in learning more about the no position, you can go to their website, which is protectmassjobs.com, just so it's out there and they've had their say. Okay.
Hi, full disclosure, I'm an active volunteer for Repeal the Casino Deal. Vote yes, stop the casino mess. That's how you can remember it. If someone from MGM or the so-called coalition to protect mass jobs were here, I would ask them, and tell the questions. How come your coalition, 99% of the funding comes from 3 casino advertising companies? And how come what is your mean compensation, not your average compensation, when some of the richest people in the world are on your payroll, like Sheldon Adelson and Steve Wynn? And third, how could you have the nerve to have a job showcase for some place it's not going to be open until 2017 and bring people in for a job showcase in 2014? What are they supposed to do? Wait for 3 years for your place to get open? But I do have a question for Margie, and my question is, are there risks to Easthampton residents if a casino is located 15 miles from Easthampton? And would Easthampton's business community be affected by a casino which expects to collect $450 million a year in gambling losses, 80% of which will come from Western Massachusetts and Northwest Connecticut?
Obviously, the answer is yes.
Can I get a little detail?
Can you give a little detail? You can give a little detail.
It's just that that proximity matters. That just because this money is going to Connecticut, it's not like if we're going to cite one here and we'll stop losing that money, that they rely on 40 to 60% of their revenues come from problem gamblers. It's a well-researched fact. And that proximity matters. The incidence of problem gambling increases by 90% within a 10-mile radius of the site. And Easthampton residents will be extremely vulnerable to all the social ills of having a casino within 15 miles of them. And the business community, these are not economic engines, they're economic vacuum cleaners. They are sucking disposable income out of our community, shipping it off out of state. There is revenue going to the state, but like Greg Neffesner said, if these legislators would just raise taxes instead of doing this invisible smoke and mirrors, this is a regressive tax. So I urge you to vote yes. You can take a couple lawn signs, and I have some other stuff after.
Do we have any questions? So it looks like we have a question from the audience.
Today.
Thank you, Marcia.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I love this state, but I often feel like I'm a push-me, pull-you kind of person here in this state because we put into process a lengthy debate and legislative action that said, go ahead, communities, we're thinking about this casino thing, and granted, it came from the top down. I know that. Let's see what you think about these casinos, and we're going to give you a chance to vote yes or no, and then, based on what you vote, we're going to start the process. And they voted yes. But no, now we have to think about, we're not going to let that happen because there may be some people in this state who really want to go on the record and vote no, we don't want these casinos. It's kind of like the federal government stepping in on Massachusetts saying, all right, Massachusetts wants to do something, and a lot more people say, no, you can't do that, Massachusetts. Let's just do something. I don't know quite what to say. Whether or not I'm for or against the casino is not relevant to me. What's relevant to me is the way we're going about it. So the question is, tell me why it's okay to go through this process and reverse, maybe, depending on the outcome, something that was a decision that was made earlier by communities that really feel they need these casinos. And I guess I'll have to address that to you, Margie, because I'm coming from the other side.
First of all, the League of Women Voters hasn't reversed their position. Mm-hmm. Their position has always been against casino gambling. And so I just want to remind people that if you agree with that position, you would be voting yes on this, not no. So we haven't reversed our position. I think what's happened actually is a change in the economic climate. I think a couple of years ago, things were looking very, very dire, and people were sort of drawn into, well, we'll do anything to help with this desperate situation financially. And I think in the intervening years, which haven't been very many of them, the economic situation has turned around a bit, and a lot of information has come out that has shown us that these aren't, as we just heard, an economic engine. The casinos don't produce the revenue that we are looking for. They hurt people. They lead to problem gambling. They lead to crime. All kinds of things like that, which is what the League found out when they were studying it back in 1982. So the League is still having the same position as always. They haven't changed their position. And I think that's what democracy is all about. You get to change your mind if you made the wrong decision the first time. And I think people are feeling, we made the wrong decision the first time. We shouldn't have gone in this direction. Now we need to reverse it and go in the right direction. I think that's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions about this ballot question? Okay, I think we're going to move on. So question 4 is earned sick time for employment. And a yes vote would allow workers in Massachusetts to earn up to 40 hours of sick time a year to take care of their own health or a family member's health. And workers would earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked and can use their sick time only after they've worked for 90 days. So that's, in a nutshell, the ballot question. And that I found that writing somewhere and I thought, oh, that's perfect. Anyway, Liz Friedman is here from Mother Woman, and she is going to talk to us about the yes position on that question. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure to be here. This is really very engaging. It's wonderful to have listened to all of your positions. One of the reasons I like ballot question number 4 is that when you say yes, it's actually yes, as opposed to any of the other ballot questions where you gotta figure out yes is saying no to the mess. So that's lovely to be able to remember. If you want to vote yes, vote yes. If you want to vote no, vote no. But I think you should vote yes. So let me tell you why. So Mother Woman's been working on this issue for 6 years. We're obviously concerned about mothers and women and family welfare. That's how we came to this issue. What really got us on board is when we realized that 1 million workers in Massachusetts don't even have 1 hour of paid sick time to be able to care for themselves, to be able to care for their families. And very personally, I had a young woman, a mother, come to me. She was in her early 20s in our Pioneer Valley, right? So in Amherst at a coffee shop, to be not named. And she had a very sick child at home, and the child was being left with the neighbor. And she then went to her employer and said, my child is sick. I'm leaving her with the neighbor, but I need to take the child to the doctor. And the employer said, well, that's fine. Feel free to take your child to the doctor. And if you do that, you will be fired. And that was shocking to me. You know, I imagine this to happen other places in my little protective brain, that these kinds of things don't happen where I live. But that's the reality. There's another very powerful little video. Again, Pioneer Valley, a woman working at one of our local college cafeterias, very same experience with her daughters. This is a very common experience for families that they are put in, and for all workers, but I'm talking about parents in particular. They're put in the impossible position of having to choose between the job they need and the child they love, that they're being forced to decide that children need to either be sent to school sick, that they need to go to work sick, or that they will forfeit and potentially forfeit their jobs and their abilities to support their families. So 1 million workers don't get even 1 hour of sick time. This would ensure that workers can earn sick time. This is not anybody being given sick time. This is workers being able to earn sick time at the rate that we just talked about, that workers will earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked and can use their sick time after working for 90 days. There is protection for small businesses. Businesses that are under 10 employees will not have to provide paid sick time. They will provide protected sick time so that an employee can't be fired if they take their time. It's also very good for business, because when business provides sick time, they retain employees, they maintain a healthy workforce, they ensure that they have high productivity. So there's benefits to employers that are very significant. And I am happy to talk more about this after. I brought some information from the Yes on 4 campaign, as well as my business card if you'd like to look at that. And the Yes on 4 campaign is active and online.
Great. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
And again, we did reach out to local chambers of commerce, the Mass Retailers Association, some local tourism groups, the Vote No on question 4 folks. We reached out to lots of people in an attempt to get a person to speak on the vote no position here tonight, and we were unsuccessful. However, they did send us a statement, and
They sent a statement.
Connie, our very kind volunteer, will read the statement that was sent to us by no on question 4.
It's bad for small businesses, costly for taxpayers, and puts politics before good public policy. Why voters should vote no on ballot question 4. One size does not fit all for employers or employees. Most employers already offer some sort of paid time off for full-time employees. This mandate would apply to all employees, including part-timers. The 16-year-old youth working in his first job at a mom-and-pop restaurant, the UMass student working on campus, or the seasonal state employee who has a summer job would all be included. It should be sick days, not sick hours, and not family leave. Question 4 would allow employees to take leave for themselves and for family members in as little as 1 and 2 hour increments without any notification to the employer. Everyone gets sick and needs a day now and then, but the ability to take in 1 and 2 hour increments would be disruptive to the employer, fellow employees, and customers, particularly in small businesses. Many work settings are far more different from offices, as the operation must be fully staffed at all times in order to prevent disruptions in customer service or to meet mandatory staffing levels. In those cases, a replacement worker must be brought in to work that shift, doubling the payroll for that position. This sick leave mandate will increase payroll and red tape compliance costs and will create a managerial nightmare to track paid time off that has been accumulated, used, and banked. Small businesses in many cases lack the resources to employ HR professionals and compliance lawyers, creating opportunities for trial attorneys to file damaging lawsuits. Flexibility for personnel policies is beneficial for employees and employers alike, and question 4 takes innovation backwards. If passed, this question will prevent those who do provide benefits from enjoying their present competitive advantage in a limited work pool, as a benefit would be replaced by a union contract-like mandate. The inflexibility mandate will prevent innovative and employee-friendly policies such as the growing trend to paid time off policies. Part-time employees resolve scheduling problems amongst themselves or through communication with their supervisor. Shift swapping is the norm, and it works for both sides, allowing employees to prioritize their absences and also to meet the non-traditional labor demands of restaurants, hotels, stores, and daycare centers. This mandate will be costly to the taxpayers of Massachusetts. Part-time public employees and taxpayer-subsidized contract employees would be included in this mandate. The California legislature excluded home health care workers in their recently passed law due to the annual taxpayer cost exceeding $100 million. The SEIU withheld their final support due to the taxpayer protection compromise. This measure covers those home health care workers by giving them state employee status and sends the tab to taxpayers. This is yet another regulatory cost burden that small businesses will struggle with in a time of greater competition and slow customer spending growth. The highest health insurance premiums in the country, the highest electricity rates, highest minimum wage, and various other costs of doing business are holding back local small businesses, job expansion, and payroll growth. Supporters of question 4 are primarily, Massachusetts would have the most broad and rigid mandate of any state in the country. Connecticut exempts employees with less than 50 employees. California allows 3 days, and neither allow for increments as low as 1 or 2 hours. No other state has passed a mandated leave policy by ballot initiative. Legislative compromises in the 2 states with laws have resulted in more common sense, affordable, and balanced approaches.
Thanks, Connie. So, questions for question 4 for either of our, for Liz or generally. And actually, Greg, you had said that if there was a question as a small business owner, you might feel like you might want to field it. So I'm going to allow for that possibility as well. And you have a question.
Can I just ask from here? Liz, I just wondered if you could tell us, or if you know what, you mentioned a formula for earning. Do you know what Massachusetts state employees get for sick time? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Okay, because it seems to me, I worked for the federal government like 30 years ago, and it seems to me that we got 2 weeks of sick time a year starting out, which is like double what this question's asking for. So I just wondered, in comparison to other either states, they mentioned a few, or even countries, if you knew how this would kind of stack up.
Yeah, no, I don't actually know that. That's an excellent question, and I don't know the answer. What I do know is that it's earned, it's based on every 30 hours worked, you earn 1 hour. After 90 days, you can start to utilize that. And you can't acquire more than 40 hours in a year. Your business can provide you with additional hours, but the law would then mandate that maximum of 40 hours.
Okay, my point being, this seems rather modest.
Yes, it seems. Exactly.
Well, my experience as mayor of West Springfield was that because all government workers are union employees, the benefits that you have are very similar to the state and the municipal level, that they're pretty generous. Except for the mayor. The mayor doesn't get vacation or sick time or unemployment.
This would change that.
But
sick time for mayors.
The mayor can work 1 day a week if he wanted to also, but that's another story. But so as a small business owner, and I've talked to many other small businesses, they find it to be burdensome. And also coming from the private sector and then going to be mayor and living among the municipal world, I found the benefits just to be outrageous, that we don't get any of those things. You're not going to get 80% of your retirement when you retire. 80% of us don't even have retirement of self-employed people, and the majority of people who work in the United States are self-employed. And to see the benefits that they get are just outrageous. And so having all that sick time, it sounds great, but I'm sick, and I'm here today volunteering and speaking on this behalf. It doesn't bother me. I'm happy to work hard. Don't expect people to push you along. Go and do it, right? So I'm sure Mike would probably have. You manage the Big Y, right?
Right.
I'm curious if you have any observations about what this might do to your business.
Well, they...
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, really.
Mike, do you want to answer the question? You don't have to.